Brett, I continue to hear that selling staffing is harder than ever before, whether we're selling to potential clients or we're selling staffing to candidates. Do you think that's true? Or do you see the majority of the industry is sort of playing out of the old playbook that they know and they're hoping for different results?
I think it's the playbook situation for sure. The staffing industry is without a shadow of a doubt evolving. Technology, law changes, AI, new forms of staffing, in the face of things like RPOs. I think it's more or less the playbook situation where the definition of insanity is starting to come into play of trying the same thing over and over and hoping for a different result. You've got to be a bit flexible. And I know we'll get more into it, but I think the focus has been on the candidate for the better part of 15 years. And that's still the case. But simply put, Brad, it's how does the candidate want to be met and dealt with is different. And if you're not evolving that way as a staffing company, you feel like there's just no one available to you whatsoever because you are trying it the same old way. Good question.
How does the modern candidate want to be met? What are you seeing?
Well, if you study demographics, and even just watching our own salespeople, the days of cold calling and somebody picking up the phone almost seem to be over, which aging myself a bit is hard to hear from our people, but it's true. When I get a phone call, my iPhone tells me it's spam and I don't answer it. And if you don't know the person, you're not going to engage with them. So connecting on social media first, texting, even chatbots and AI where it's quick and to the point is what we're seeing the candidate wants more than ever before.
It's funny you say that. My phone was ringing the other day on the counter and my wife looked at me and she's like, "You're not going to get that?" I said, "Absolutely not. I have no idea who that is." It's just some random number. It made sense. She was like, "Why aren't you going to get that?" I was like, "Because I don't know what they want and I don't want to talk to them right now. We're playing with the kids. We got things going on. What do you mean?" And
Right.
I think in a lot of ways that's true. We're playing out of this old playbook from a sales standpoint. Even on the candidate side of things, we're cold calling people and we're prospecting and we're hoping people pick up. But no one wants that sort of intrusion from their cell phones anymore. We're used to spam in our news feeds on social media. We're used to spam in our inboxes via email because I think there's a lot of companies that don't do email marketing well. So it's sort of just
Yeah.
noise. We're used to that. But it's interesting that phone calls are sort of our last protected space. We do not want to be spammed when it comes to a cold call.
No. And I aging myself again, I always remember the old Jerry Seinfeld episodes, where he answers the phone and he's like, give me your phone number, I'll call you back. And he's like, "No, we don't do that, sir." And he's like, "Oh, why? You don't want me to call you and bother you at home?" And the guy goes, "No." And he goes, "Now you know how I feel." And he hangs up the phone. And I think that's more prevalent now than ever before because we all have such, air quotes, busy lives to deal with. So absolutely, it's a lot of noise out there.
Do you think some of the leading staffing firms are pulling away from the pack at a faster rate than ever before?
So our data suggests that there's certainly hotspots geographically, vertically, through segments. And when interviewing or engaging with them or going to these trade shows or associations, what we do see is there is a consistency around taking care of the candidate. Um, what I mean by that is if you don't have the inventory, you don't matter. And prior to being at TempWorks, I spent 12 years in staffing myself, and how we operated and what we learned was sales is both on recruiting and the traditional selling business to business. You have to sell yourself to the candidates. what am I going to do for you as a candidate? Am I going to get you the best possible job, or am I just going to get you a job? War for talent has always been at the center of staffing. And I think in those hot segments, in those hot markets, the staffing companies that have the inventory and are educated around the inventory, around pay rates, environment needs, PPE needs, hybrid work schedules, whatever the case may be in that space and what it calls for. The staffing company that really knows their inventory and can consult and educate their clients on it are the ones who are winning.
It changes the landscape completely from a transactional industry to more consultative.
Perfectly said. Absolutely does.
So then why, if we know that and we can articulate that, are so many staffing firms still operating in a transactional landscape?
Well, if you look at the staffing industry as a whole, this is my belief and our belief here as a leadership group at TempWorks is the industry's been dropping consistently since it peaked in the summer of 2022. Um, and it's for what we've already talked about, but it's also really heavily entrenched in the candidate experience, more or less. And whether you're set up multi-generational, new owner, PE backed, public, there's so many different types of structured staffing companies. What happens inevitably is this fear or desire to chase. The goal to put a job order on the board to get revenue. The story we tell a lot when we get into consulting is when I sold back in the day staffing, in the 0809 crash, we were just desperate to get a job order on the board. And it didn't matter if we had the inventory or not. Our leaders felt like morale would boost if we had something to work on, which made sense in the moment. But the wasted energy, the impressions that were left on the candidates and at the customer level were really damaging. And as I kind of grew up in the business world, what I actually realized was happening was we were chasing revenue. And when you chase revenue because you have someone that you need to impress or take care of or a bottom line to meet, it often causes more harm than good. So to your question, Brad, about why are people staying in that transactional state, I think it's really simple. I think it's fear of meeting a number, whatever that number is, revenue, job orders, ownership, pressure, you name it. I think that's why people stay there.
Presumably, though, if they didn't chase, they'd probably be better off, right? If they worked at a more consultative level, you'd have deeper relationships with your clients, you'd have deeper relationships with your talent, whether
Yeah.
it's people that are on assignment or people that you could put on assignment. To me, and I know I sit in sort of a different seat here in a consultative seat, and I'm not in the day-to-day trenches as a recruiter. I'm not in the day-to-day trenches selling staffing services. But to me, it seems like you would be better off in the consultative role than in the let's just get an order and put someone in that role.
The data would say you're 100% right, Brad. At least from what we're seeing, the companies that are growing are prioritizing their talents and they're being experts in their space. As things tighten, simply meaning the revenue in the staffing industry shrinks and more people are competing for the same scraps, if you will. Um, those who are transactional are going to fight to the bottom of margins and they're going to win on price. The companies who are experts in their space, who take their time and fill the right orders that they have the appropriate inventory in, can still staff at a premium. And those are the companies that are doing well. I briefly mentioned the RPO model. The RPO model is so unique. And it's been around for a decade or so, but it's growing steam where companies are outsourcing recruiters, and those recruiters are upping and lowering their hours on a weekly basis to help fill orders to kind of combat that transactional race to the bottom. Point being, at least I think, is if you're not evolving or getting in that consultative space, you're getting put in this commoditization bucket. I remember when I was with Aerotech, we had so much data that was presented to us in 2009, 2010, as we were coming out of that situation. And what our leadership shared with us was how closely the US staffing industry modeled after the European staffing industry. And what was happening over there was a mass commoditization. No offense to used car salesmen, but the analogy that was given was, if you are in staffing in Europe, they view you like Americans view kind of greasy used car salesmen. And I think that's the space that we're now in over these last 4 years, is the ones that try and offer everything are the ones that are really, really struggling and getting put into a bucket to lower pricing, to extend out, AR collections, and to fit in this big group where they're all competing in the same pool of candidates, and that's killing them.
Yeah. I mean, it's incredibly difficult to compete apples to apples, right? If then I think you get exactly as you're saying, you start competing on price. When you compete on price, it's a race to the bottom in my mind, right? You're
Yeah,
just trying to beat each other up over the lowest possible number, at which rate it cannot even be sustainable. In my mind, probably not. You're probably losing money in the great scheme of things as you continue to beat yourself up on price. And ultimately, just a bad look for the industry when we do that to each other, because then clients, they have no idea what the price actually should be. And there's no real consensus into, well, you're charging X, but now you can charge Y. If I ask for A, now you can give me B. So then what goes into your price? You're just making it up. It's just some sort of arbitrary markup number that you can't even articulate. So
right.
I think when we start to compete on price, it devalues our service, but it also devalues what goes into a markup, because at the end of the day, it looks like you're just making up a number.
Hey, really quick. Usually this is where I talk about one of Haley Marketing Services. But today, our co-CEO, David, asked me to make a very specific offer exclusive to listeners of Take the Stage and Insights. Candidly, I think he's a little crazy, but here we go. He told me I could offer a $10,000 staffing website for half. That includes one of our proven starter sites, fully customized for your firm, brand new copy, our career portal software, and foundational SEO, all for 2 payments of $2,500, plus hosting and licensing. I gotta be honest, the reason he's doing this, he wants me to prove people are actually listening to this show. So if you're thinking about a new website, message me on LinkedIn and mention the crazy website promo from Take the Stage or Insights. One catch, it's limited to the first 7 staffing firms. So don't wait. All right, let's get back to the show.
Perfectly said. And there are fixed costs that we can't do anything about. FICA, SUDA, FUTA. I think most understand those, the workers' comp insurance and the burdens of those things. When you get into these low markups and you race to the bottom, what I believe happens, and what I've always been taught, and I don't think this is unique to staffing either, is you put the leverage and the power in the buyer's hands. A tagline or a cliche statement that we used to make all the time was, you could be the biggest user in staffing. You could have thousands of temporaries in your facility. At the end of the day, they still don't recruit or hire a fraction of what the staffing industry does. We're the experts. I can't say we anymore. Formerly, that was our statement, right? Is we're the experts. You staffing companies are the experts. If you're walking in begging, essentially saying, I can match that rate, give me a shot, you're sending a signal that says, I'm not an expert. I'm just a transactional, commoditized provider. I'll give you what you're asking for, which is a warm body, because that's the best I can do, because all I am is chasing. Now I can't really give you any form of consultation around what a good candidate actually wants and needs. And we're not helping you at all. We're just providing you a small need for a short period of time. And then you're going to loop me into that same group of everybody else when that candidate stops showing up. So it's absolutely crippling to the whole industry. We used to talk a lot about the art of selling when it comes to staffing. If you walk into a call center or a hospital network or a manufacturing facility and you ask for business from a temporary services perspective and they don't use staffing, you first have to convince them to use staffing. Then you have to convince them to use you. So it's easier to go into companies and sell to ones that are use staffing. Then the question comes down to, what is your value? What are you providing? And now more than ever, but I would argue it's always mattered, given how tight it is now, it's true to say now more than ever, you have to have that story straight and you have to own it.
I would wager most staffing firms don't know that story, at least stereotypically. I think we go in and we try to break up a relationship, right? We try to be the new girlfriend in the room.
Yeah.
And like I already have somebody. I already am working with a partner. I already have a staffing vendor. Things are going pretty well. Yeah, there's things that I would change. There's things I like, I don't like, but for the most part, things are okay. And now you're trying to walk in and sort of disrupt that. Is a very difficult thing to do, especially if you don't have your story straight.
Well said. I 100% agree with you.
Yeah. You've talked about candidate experience a few times, and you've talked about how we need to own the candidate experience. We need to meet the candidate where they want to be met. What are you seeing in terms of the best staffing and recruiting firms doing right now to give the candidates everything that they're looking for?
It's several things. One, I think you have to start by understanding where your niche is at and what's going on. So let's make it somewhat hypothetical and real. You're a staffing company. One of the hottest long-going industries that actually has been growing consistently is skilled trades recruiting, right? There's been a documented shortage of blue collar skilled workers for a very long time.
Yeah. I saw a report the other day. We're going to need 390,000 more welders by 2026.
You could automate some of those things, right? There's machine welding, but when you get into the true art of it, you can't. When you get into underwater welding or pipe welding or different things on those lines, you simply can't. So if you're living in that space, you need to really be educated around pick a city. I'm in Minneapolis. In the Minneapolis area, in the West Metro, in the North Metro, here's the pay rates. Here are the needs that a welder has or an electrician has. And here's a candidate that I am representing, almost as like a sports agent, saying this is what I'm bringing. That candidate needs to have a relationship with me that says, Brett's my guy. Staffing ABC company is my rep. They've taken care of me. They've given me the assignments. They haven't put me on those programs that are gross jobs, unsafe, too hot. They've paid me what I've asked. I've gotten benefits. I've been trained. When my assignment's coming to an end, they've remained engaged with me the entire time, and they're talking about my next job already, so that I don't have a lack of in employment. Those candidates are looking for that. That's not really new, Brad. What's new is these candidates also want to know that you're taking care of them in the sense of education, upskilling. I'm a part of a couple of associations, one being in Texas. And one thing that was discussed a lot is what are our top educations, coming out of schools, colleges, high school, even if there's specializations, tech schools, those types of things. And how does it match the open job market? And it's actually pretty scary in a lot of cases. You've got the top graduate degrees not matching the top openings, and it's almost inverted. So if you really want to own your niche, if you really want to own your candidate experience, how are you building that inventory as you go? So if a natural progression is a skilled assembly tech or a machine operator into a mechanic or into a welder, how are you helping them get those skills? If a candidate feels like you're helping them add to their resume and meet their personal needs and their personal goals, they're going to stick with you as that loyal sports agent or company. So I think it's more than what it's really ever been, is being able to say, here's what I'm bringing to the table for you, the candidate, and I'm going to go work my butt off to go find that right thing for you that meets your current needs, your future needs, your families, everything that you have going on. If a candidate feels that way, they'll stick with you. If they don't, they'll happily leave for the next endeavor, and then you may become obsolete to them. And now you have no inventory, and now you're in trouble. The last thing that I think is important as it pertains to the candidate experience is, do you actually know your people and what they want? And the only way to do that is by remembering that we are in the people business and that relationships matter. So if you have a candidate, you need to know how they want to be engaged. Do they want a phone call? Do they want to check in? Do they want an email? Do they want a text? Do they mind engaging with a chat bot or automation saying, hey, Brad, FYI, we're aware your assignment's supposed to end in the next month. When's a good time for us to reconnect? If you're using some sort of bot, it's okay to use that initial connection, especially if you know someone's going to engage with it. But then you and I have to get back to connecting and actually physically talking. And if you're a really important candidate to me and my company, going out to a lunch, understanding what you need, that's the difference. And I think that's how you stay ahead of the game. You have to have the inventory.
I think it's interesting to meet them, one, in a communication style that they want to be met. But I want to go back to your sports analogy there and the sports agent analogy. I love that mentality and love that methodology. I've said it on the show here a couple of times now. I think that's where the best staffing and recruiting firms win long term. I think it's going to war for your talent. It's treating everybody, at least top talent, like a stud quarterback and saying, listen, I'm going to get you the role you want now, but when you develop in 3 to 5 years, I'm going to get you the next role. And we're going to find the right team for you, the right systems for you. I'm going to get you what you're worth. It might take some time, but we're going to work through it together. And that, to me, again, comes back to the consultative industry that I think we're shifting towards, and out of the transactional industry that has made a lot of us successful in the last, 10 plus years.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, 100%. We used to joke all the time, like, find your Rod Tidwell as your Jerry Maguire and make sure you're showing them the money. And it's fully, but I mean, at the end of the day, it's true. I mean, if you could walk in to a business to business sales opportunity at a facility that's had that now hiring welders sign outside, they have the posts up, they're burning for it, they need it. You walk in with several candidates and you inform them what it costs to have those candidates, they have a choice to make, to say, do I want to, partner with this company? Do I want to learn from them? Do I want their data and their information that coincides with their talent? Or do we as an employer want to keep going this way? Because this is one thing that we haven't talked about, Brad, a lot, is employers can still be part of the problem. Who you partner with and what your clientele is also matters. So if you're a niche-based staffing company who's really, really good at finding welders because you have an inventory, you're taking care of them, you're bringing them to, you go and you partner with that company who's desperate, who finally says, fine, but they don't change the way they operate, you're going to upset your talent pool, and that's going to hurt you. So you have to make sure that you're meeting with people at the right level in that organization and telling them that I'm here to bring you something, but you need to treat me as who I am, which is the expert in this market, in this space, in this skill set. And if you want what I have to offer, you need to kind of meet me where I am as the employer of record here, as the staffing company, because I'm bringing you the talent. And if that company's not willing to adopt, all of this falls on its face, right? So who you're partnering with matters a lot still too.
What do you think AI is going to do to continue to shake up the industry?
Oh boy. Well, how long have we been talking about AI now, Brad, at trade shows and different things?
Hopefully long enough where people are starting to listen.
That-
You know, I had an interesting conversation with Nicole Krensky a little while ago, and the conversation sort of shifted from AI isn't coming, AI is here, and it's whether or not you are going to be at the front of the pack or watching the pack pull away. And I think that's completely true.
I saw that you posted on ASA recently and had an interview with ChatGPT, and I started watching a bit yesterday and got sidetracked, but I think it's brilliant. I mean, one, it's a tool we could use, and you can either adopt it or not. If you don't, we'll put it on the record here. I know I can speak for you based on what you've been saying in the past. You're a fool and you're going to be left behind. It's not going away. There are several schools of thought here. One, we can fight it. We can put legislation around it. We can limit its use, right? I believe it was posted a month or so ago on ASA's blog that 2 super users in their MSPs had generic language that said no AI. And that's all that it said. My belief after digging into that a little bit was there's lawsuits out in New Jersey, New York, and other places now where AI was used to essentially pick a candidate, place that candidate, and remain engaged with that candidate. And what ended up happening in a couple of the cases was the candidates that were picked and selected met a certain demographic. So essentially, the staffing agency was discriminating. Well, co-employment can come up, and possibly the large super user of staffing also ends up getting in trouble for that. So it makes sense that a user would say, I don't want this here. Well, I don't think that's wise, personally. I think AI has lots to offer. As we started this podcast, candidates nowadays are very open and willing to engage through text message, through chatbots. Some of that's automation, some of that's AI. The big staffing companies used to have such a competitive advantage, Brad, where we would literally go in and someone would say, okay, Brett, why you over somebody else? And I would simply say, I have more fishing poles. We're all fishing from the same pond, but I have thousands of recruiters and the mom and pop agency you're dealing with has 3. So you're right. I'm not going to argue that we're not fishing from the same pond. I just have more people. AI shrinks that gap, right? Automation shrinks that gap. It allows you to engage with and talk with those candidates while you're not even working. It gives you the opportunity to recruit with 10 recruiters when you only have 1 or 2 or 5, whatever it ends up being. So that's a positive. The scary part about that is if you're a recruiter or you're a salesperson, you may say, well, AI could take my job.
Hey, a quick pause before we get back to the show, because this is something every staffing leader needs to hear. Most staffing firms are spending a lot on benefits and still only covering about half of their workforce. That's exactly why I like what my friends at Benefits in a Cart are doing. Instead of forcing owners into expensive, bundled health plans, they offer unbundled benefits designed for high turnover workforces. Things like free prescriptions through their free RX program, dental, vision, virtual urgent care, and supplemental coverage with no deductibles. The result? you can offer benefits to 100% of your workforce, control costs, and actually improve retention. If benefits have felt like a losing game, check out my friends at benefitsinacard.com and schedule a quick unbundled benefits review. Again, that's benefitsinacard.com. All right, let's get back to the show.
You can, I guess, and that's a threat. But I don't think that that's necessarily going to be a reality. I think this change is more of a tool, and all the shows that you and I have been to, and all of the panels and all of the discussions have essentially been saying just that. It's a tool. Tools have, over the time of history, have rendered skills or job categories irrelevant. So it would be foolish of us to say that it's not going to have an impact. I think it's going to have an impact. I think the more that staffing can band together and figure out how we want it to play and what we want it to do, will allow us to kind of go back to those super users of staffing to dictate, okay, no AI is fine in these areas, but it's not fine in these areas. Let's define where human intersection has to take over. And I think that that's the kind of shuffling that's still going on. But inevitably, it's going to have a disruption in our space. But as you and I have discussed for the first 30 minutes of this podcast, we are in the people business, and that is never going to go away. When you're employed, you need to know that there is somebody out there who has your back and wants to take care of you, or is going to help you get that upskilling that you need and that you want. That war for talent that has existed in the staffing industry for hundreds of years is never going to go away. And people want to know that somebody, not something, has their back. So I don't think it completely, diminishes what it is that we're doing. I think human engagement is always going to matter. It's going to be a matter of how do you use the tool to help meet the objectives that you have as a business. And I hope that's not too generic, but that's kind of where I'm sitting right now. I do think the buyers have real power to figure out where they want this to go. I think legislation has real power on how this happens. On the legislation front, if we think about when and where and how staffing has really catapulted, it's been because laws have come into play to make hiring harder or to make employment more administrative. Thinking of like the ACA days, or even that short window in COVID where there was threats to have vaccine records on, and everyone fought those types of things. I actually live in the camp where I think those laws are good for staffing, because if hiring's a burden, a nuisance, employers are going to say, I don't want to deal with it.
Right.
I'm happy to pay somebody else to deal with it with a markup. Fighting certain things or allowing other things to happen, I think is pretty critical in our space. So banding together to make it more of a tool, less of a burden, but also a restriction in some ways, can really, really help the staffing industry.
Yeah, I had an interesting thought the other day that AI isn't necessarily destroying the industry. I think it's exposing it. I think it's exposing a lot of players who have just sort of been pushing papers, sourcing, screening resumes, kind of going through these C and D level tasks and calling it a job at a level that it's now exposing who those average players are and who the really, really good players are. And I don't think that destroys the industry. I think it exposes the people that you want to be doing business with and the people who frankly need to sort of figure it out or might go the way of the dodo.
That's brilliant, Brad. You gotta get that posterized somewhere.
somewhere, right? Put on a shirt.
Yeah,
Maybe that's if I speak at Staffing World, maybe I'll throw it on a shirt this year.
there you go.
But yeah, I think in a lot of ways, AI is just exposing the things that we already know is true, right? And if you're afraid that AI is going to take your job, then we need to think about what you're doing to upskill yourself to make yourself a little bit more irreplaceable. And I think you were spot on, right? I think we'd be naive to say, okay, there are going to be some elements of your role that will go towards AI. There are things that you don't need to be doing all day. And that's a good thing because I'm in your camp. If that frees me up to form deeper relationships and actually talk to candidates, or on the sales side of things, talk to prospects, good. That's all I want to be doing. So
Right.
I think in a lot of ways, it should free up a lot of that mundane nonsense so that you can do more of the stuff that you actually want to do, that you're actually good at.
Yeah. I had a colleague who former colleague who wasn't as artistic with his words like you were about the exposure piece, but one thing that he brought up as a possible side effect of AI and automation, I think is worth having a discussion about always, is eventually someone's going to get burned, right? We've seen it a couple of times. AI is machine learning. It's a tool. It needs to be worked on. It needs to get better and better and better, which means there are bad pieces of data out there. You know, even if you engage with ChatGPT, it gives you different information than ASA does or SIA does, the powers of our space, which, okay, you say, hey, can you double check that? And it comes back, oh, yeah, you're right. I was wrong. You know, so are we going to get lazy? What's going to happen? Well, my former colleague's comment was, is this going to potentially expose people, to your point, who struggle with human engagement? And is this then going to encourage the art of exactly what you and I are doing right now, which is saying, hey, all right, Brad, it was fun engaging with you for a while there electronically. I think you're a smart guy. I'd like to have a conversation with you to confirm that you're not a robot, right? And maybe that's actually going to enhance the people business a bit to say, hey, this isn't something I really want to mess around with. My pay and my livelihood are what allow me to take care of everything that it is I need to take care of. At the end of the day, I am just looking for a job, right? But please don't mess with that because it messes with everything else that I'm doing. So now I need to meet the human behind the robot, was his point. So the art of hiding behind a keyboard, I guess it's not an art. The mistake of hiding behind a keyboard of a texting machine of using a bot may end up needing to be supplemented with the art of the interview, the art of a cup of coffee, of a lunch date, to where we're actually going to have to sit down, put our technology down, and get to know one another the way we used to. Uh, and I walked away from that conversation being like, "Oh, it sounds like a great world. I'd love to get back there," you know? So it could have a benefit to the staffing space. We don't know yet, is the moral of the story. What we do know is what you said. It's here. Stop fighting it. Change is inevitable. It's the only constant in life, along with taxes, I suppose, as the saying goes. So embrace it, learn it.
Brett, anything on your mind that we haven't talked about or that I didn't ask about? I know you got your hands in a lot over at TempWorks. Anything that you wish we talked on in the last 35 to 40 minutes that I didn't touch on?
Yeah, just kind of looking at my prep notes. I think we circled around it a little bit, but there are areas of growth, right? There's the healthcare industry that blew up post COVID. It kind of got to an artificial ceiling with the demand of travel nurses and how much was paid for that. And then it kind of fell back down, but it has leveled out and it's still higher than it was significantly pre-COVID. I believe the numbers suggest that it's higher than anything else. So that's a space that I think is still going to thrive for a while. You can't ignore the data around the baby boomers and what they're going to need as time goes on. So that space is still hot. We've talked about skilled trades. We've talked about skilling up a little bit. But I think the thing that I'd like to emphasize more than anything else is, yeah, things are a bit scary, right? It's been a tough slog for 40 straight months almost, dating back to the summer of 2022. But there are spaces. Construction has been going well. You've got the data centers. We've talked about healthcare. Become an expert in something. Don't chase, don't take that business that you've been avoiding taking forever because it doesn't meet your brand. Don't race to the bottom. Don't give up on margins. Some of the things that I look at outside of your traditional employment numbers and job postings is hours worked per week, time on assignments, collections. Those still are kind of bouncing around and haven't found stable ground just yet. And I think part of that has to do with everything that we've talked about today, which is, that transactional business. So my encouragement to everyone is find your lane, know your value, and stick with it, and have a little bit of an ego that says, I do this more than you do. X percent, 50, whatever it may be in your region, in your space is still okay to ask for. There are still open positions all over the place. And that doesn't mean we should cheapen our products to go get there. So we put out a couple of white papers recently as a company around margin management. I believe ASA picked one of them up, and around collections, and the direction that Net 30 is heading is scary. Freeze your clients out and have that tough conversation, because a lot of times they're kind of just taking advantage of the situation, and you're not a bank, so don't be one. So that would be kind of the one thing that I could think of that we didn't really delve too much into is the business side of staffing.
Perfect. Before I get you to our rapid fire round, I want to give you the space and the floor to tell everyone a little bit more about yourself and what you do over at TempWorks and about TempWorks.
Yeah. So I've been here for 7 years. I'm the president of TempWorks and Lono Payroll. We are homegrown. Our founder started the business actually for his dad and brother, and it evolved. He created what is now our core product to kind of help them be a little bit more efficient in this space. This was even pre ATS and CRM. It was primarily Paybill, and we've just added and maintained that piece of software for the better part of 27 years. We pride ourselves in functionality and uptime, but we really pride ourselves in service. I had mentioned earlier, I spent 12 years in staffing prior to coming here. We hire a lot of folks with that same background. We think it's important that, a day in the life of a recruiter or a salesperson is really, really important to know as we service you, as we help you use the technology, the new releases that we have, and what it is that we're doing. So that's really what TempWorks stands for. We have a second company, Lono Payroll. That's our services side of the business, where we help with corporate taxes, payroll, and factoring loans as well. Since 2023 and the shrinking of the industry, we've seen a lot of the big players do some pretty sizable layoffs. And what ends up happening is those folks start their own companies. And I remember leaving the industry myself thinking, I could probably do this. And I'm glad I didn't, because there's a lot of things that I wouldn't have known, around insurance and, net payment terms and different things like that. Of course, I understood P&L. Of course, I understood selling and recruiting, but there's so many pieces to the business that I think get overlooked that can end up costing you quite a bit. So we stood that business up a little over a decade ago, and we've really seen it take off because the industry has come up with so many startups. I was at a trade show with ASA, and they were talking about, historic numbers in 23, 24, and I believe it repeated in 25 in startups coming into the space. And I think that too is putting pressure on the commoditization, on the transactional business. These folks who are coming in are saying, hey, I've got my lane and I'm going to live in this for as long as I can. So that side of our business is also going really, really well. And what we try very hard to do, and I'll admit we're not perfect. I don't think anybody is, but what we try really, really hard to do is to be there. We know staffing's hard. We know there's pressure. We have millions of people who are employed through our database at any point in time, and we think there's stories to tell there. So we try and consult and help our clients as much as we possibly can with that data, with their own data, trying to help coach them so that they're armed and ready when they go into these meetings. And I believe that that's really important. My personal journey took me from recruiting and selling into Chicago to leading multiple offices and operations in Canada, to then national sales, and kind of got to touch most portions of the business. And I know firsthand how hard it is. I remember those '09 days like they were yesterday, going into these facilities on the south side of Chicago and thinking they're going to cancel my meeting, only to learn that they wanted my meeting because they were afraid that they were going to get laid off later that day. And they wanted me to have their resume. And what ended up happening was the more that I took those meetings and the more that I was there for those people, when they stayed and things turned around, I was their first phone call. And that consultative supporting voice is what really propelled my career personally. And I think that we're in that same space. It just looks a little bit different now. So if we could be a voice, if we can help, if we can consult our clients and they could turn around and consult theirs, I think we're offering something pretty special. So that's kind of who we are and my personal journey.
If you're a staffing owner planning to scale in 2026, listen closely. For more than 35 years, Tricom has partnered with staffing owners to support growth without adding unnecessary risk or back office burden. Tricom is not a factoring company. They're an asset-based lender and full-service back office partner, building solutions tailored to your staffing business and cash flow needs. If growth is starting to create pressure around payroll, cash flow, or administration, Tricom provides the flexibility and operational support to help you expand with confidence. I trust their team and have known them for over a decade. To learn more, visit tricom.com and request a conversation to see how they support your staffing business. All right, let's get back to the show.
Let's get through our rapid fire round. And I appreciate you going through all of that for us. The first question I'm going to ask you is one book that's fundamentally changed your life.
So when I started at Aerotech, we were required to read How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. And I think it was like the first piece of homework that I ever got where I was like, oh, I better pay attention to this.
Yep.
I'd be lying to you if I told you that didn't have a significant influence. I don't know if the content itself did. Radical candor probably comes to mind a little bit more about, really talking to people the way that they want to be talked to, but not sugarcoating it. We all have stuff to work on. And as a leader, if you're not helping them through those gaps, not just telling them they're not good at something, but coaching them through it, that whole upskilling thing that we talked about doesn't happen. So I'd say the contents of that book were a little bit more stick with it for me than How to Win Friends and Influence People. But it's true to say that that was the first bit of homework I actually probably came.
Yeah, I hear that loud and clear. And one piece of advice that you would give to somebody just starting in staffing and recruiting, what would you tell them?
Know your lane. Take every meeting, get to know people. As you evolve and shape what it is that you have to bring to the table and offer, own that. There's so much garbage information out there. We talked about ChatGPT. You can get the wrong answer there. You can get the wrong answer through Google. We all know the news outlets. We all know social media. Truly become the expert. Get the data yourself and lean into it and learn it. Whether you're recruiting, selling, starting your own business, I think that is pivotal no matter what.
He's Brett Cavanagh. Brett, had a fantastic time, my friend. I appreciate you coming on the show and sharing all your insights with us.
Thanks, Brad. I had a great time. Appreciate it. Thanks for teaching me too.
That's what we're here for. It's a two-way street. So I appreciate you. I'm sure I'll run into you at a conference here soon.
No doubt.
And when our paths cross, definitely make sure you stop and say hey.
Absolutely. You too.